Sarah Thompson couldn't see anything, but what she saw that night changed Elvis forever. Among 25,000 people, only she truly understood who Elvis really was. It was November 3rd, 1974, at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis was in the middle of one of his most electrifying performances of the year. The arena was packed to capacity with 25,000 screaming fans, their voices creating a wall of sound that could be heard for miles. Elvis had just finished burning love to thunderous applause. Sweat glistening on his forehead under the bright stage lights, he was wearing his iconic white jumpsuit with the golden eagle design, and the energy was absolutely electric. But in Section C, row 15, seat 23, sat a little girl who experienced this concert completely differently than everyone else. 9-year-old Sarah Thompson had been blind since birth, but her love for Elvis Presley's music ran deeper than most people who could see him perform. She knew every song, every vocal inflection, every emotional nuance in Elvis's voice. Sarah's parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, had saved for 8 months to afford these tickets. Robert worked double shifts at the Memphis cotton mill, and Linda took on extra seamstress work just so their daughter could experience her idol in person. They knew Sarah couldn't see Elvis, but they also knew that for Sarah, hearing him live would be like seeing him with perfect clarity. "Daddy, is he really there?" Sarah whispered as the crowd erupted around them. Her small hands were pressed against her ears, not from the noise being too loud, but because she was trying to isolate Elvis's voice from the chaos. Robert smiled, tears forming in his eyes. "Yes, sweet heart is right there on that big stage singing just for you." What Robert didn't know was that Sarah had been preparing for this moment her entire young life. Every night for the past 3 years she would sit by her family's old radio and listen to Elvis's record. She had memorized not just the lyrics but the exact way Elvis breathed between phrases, the subtle changes in his tone, the emotion behind every word. Elvis was transitioning into the slower, more intimate part of his show. The arena lights dimmed, and he walked over to the white grand piano that had been set up stage left. This was always Sarah's favorite part of any Elvis recording, when he sang the ballads, when his voice became soft and vulnerable, when it felt like he was singing directly to her soul. "You all having a good time tonight?" Elvis asked the crowd, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made him beloved by millions. The audience roared their approval, but Sarah was focused on something else entirely. She could hear something in Elvis's voice that night, a sadness, a loneliness that reminded her of how she sometimes felt being different from other children. Elvis sat down at the piano and began the opening chords of "Love Me Tender." This was Sarah's absolute favorite Elvis song. Her mother had sung it to her as a lullaby when she was little, and she had memorized every note, every pause, every breath. As Elvis began to sing, Sarah's heart filled with joy so pure that she couldn't contain it. "Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go." Elvis's voice filled the arena with that honeyed emotional tone that had captivated the world. But then something extraordinary happened. From somewhere in the crowd, a second voice joined his. It was high, clear, and absolutely perfect in pitch. It was the voice of an angel. Elvis stopped singing mid-phrase. His hands froze on the piano keys. The backing band, confused by the sudden silence, gradually stopped playing for a moment. The only sound in the 25,000-seat arena was that pure, innocent voice continuing the song alone. "You have made my life complete, and I love you." So the audience began to quiet down, confused by what was happening. Some people started looking around, trying to figure out where that beautiful voice was coming from. Elvis stood up from the piano, his face showing a mixture of confusion and amazement. In all his years of performing, he had never heard anything quite like this. "Hold on, folks," Elvis said into his microphone, his voice gentle but carrying clearly through the arena sound system. "I need to find out where that beautiful voice is coming from." He shielded his eyes from the stage lights and peered out into the crowd. "Keep singing, honey, let me find you." Sarah, unaware that she had stopped an entire concert, continued singing the song that had become the soundtrack to her dreams. Her parents sat frozen in shock, realizing that their daughter's voice had somehow reached Elvis Presley himself. Other audience members began to turn and look at the little girl with the golden voice there. Elvis said, pointing in Sarah's general direction. "Section C." The little girl in the blue dress. Security guards started moving through the crowd, but Elvis held up his hand. "No, wait, I need to see this for myself." He stepped down from the stage, something he rarely did during concerts, and began walking through the crowd towards Sarah. As Elvis got closer, he could see Sarah more clearly. She was small for her 9 years, with long blonde hair and the sweetest face he had ever seen. But there was something else he noticed: the way she wasn't looking directly at him like everyone else. Her eyes, though bright and beautiful, didn't focus on him. As he approached, "What's your name, sweetheart?" Elvis asked, gently kneeling down in front of Sarah's seat. The crowd around them had gone completely silent. Straining to hear every word, Sarah turned toward his voice, her face lighting up with the most radiant smile Elvis had ever seen. "My name is Sarah Thompson, and I love you so much." "Elvis, Sarah, that's a beautiful name for a beautiful voice," Elvis said, his own voice beginning to crack with emotion. "How old are you, honey?" "I'm 9 years old," Sarah replied, her hands reaching out slightly, trying to locate exactly where Elvis was. It was then that Elvis realized this precious little girl couldn't see him. Elvis felt something shift in his chest, a profound emotion he had rarely experienced. Here was a child who loved his music so purely, so completely, without ever being able to see his face, his movements, his showmanship. Her love was based entirely on His voice is music, his soul. Sarah. Elvis said softly, would you like to come up on stage with me? The arena erupted in applause, but Elvis barely heard it. He was focused entirely on Sarah, who had just nodded enthusiastically, her face glowing with excitement. Daddy, did Elvis just ask me to come on stage? She whispered to her father, who was now crying openly. Yes, sweetheart, Elvis wants you to sing with him. Elvis gently took Sarah's hand and helped her stand up. Don't worry, honey, I've got you, he said as he carefully guided her toward the stage. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone wanting to touch this magical moment but respecting the sacred space around Elvis and Sarah. As they walked, Elvis realized he was experiencing something he had never felt before in his entire career. Helping Sarah up onto the stage, Elvis was struck by how small and delicate she seemed under the bright lights, but there was also something incredibly strong about her confidence that came from years of navigating the world without sight. Don't be nervous, sweetheart, Elvis said. These folks are all friends here. I'm not nervous, Sarah said with a smile that could have lit up the entire arena. I've been waiting my whole life for this moment. I've dreamed about singing with you so many times. Her words hit Elvis like a physical blow. He had to take a moment to compose himself before he could speak again. Well then, Elvis said, his voice thick with emotion, I reckon we better make this dream come true. He led Sarah over to the piano and gently helped her sit on the bench beside him. The 25,000 people in the arena had gone completely silent, understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Sarah, Elvis said, his voice now carrying through the microphone for everyone to hear, this young lady has just reminded me what music is really about. It's not about the lights or the costumes or the screaming crowds. It's about this. He gestured between himself and Sarah. It's about connection. It's about love. Elvis placed his hands on the piano keys and looked at Sarah. Ready, honey? Sarah nodded, her face serene and confident as Elvis began to play the opening chords of Love Me Tender. Again, something magical happened. Sarah's voice joined his from the very first note, and together they created something more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. Their voices blended in perfect harmony, Elvis's deep, rich tone providing the foundation, while Sarah's pure, crystalline voice soared above like an angel song. The contrast was stunning. The seasoned performer and the innocent child, the man who had seen everything and the girl who had seen nothing but felt everything. You have made my life complete and I love you so. As they sang together, Elvis found himself looking at Sarah in wonder. Her face was radiant with joy, her voice never wavering, her timing absolutely perfect. She wasn't just singing the song, she was living it, feeling every word, every note, every emotion. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfilled. The arena was so quiet that you could hear people crying. Tough construction workers were wiping their eyes. Teenagers who had come to scream and dance were standing in reverent silence. Even the security guards had stopped moving, transfixed by what they were witnessing. For my darling, I love you and I always will. As the song reached its conclusion, Elvis and Sarah held the final note together, their voices intertwining like two souls, sharing the same heart. When the music finally faded away, the silence that followed was profound, the kind of silence that comes when people have just experienced something sacred. Then the arena exploded. The standing ovation lasted for over 10 minutes, the longest in the Mid-South Coliseum's history. People were on their feet, crying, cheering, celebrating not just the performance but the pure human connection they had just witnessed. Elvis stood up and gently helped Sarah to her feet, keeping his arm protectively around her shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis said when the applause finally died down, I want you to meet Sarah Thompson. She's 9 years old, she has the voice of an angel, and she's just taught me something very important. He paused, looking down at Sarah with genuine affection. She's taught me that sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones who can't see us at all. Sarah looked up toward Elvis's voice and said something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Elvis, I can see you through your voice, I can see your heart, and it's beautiful. The simplicity and honesty of her words broke down every wall Elvis had ever built around his emotions. For the first time in years, he cried openly on stage. You know what, Sarah? Elvis said, his voice cracking. You see me better than most people who have perfect vision. You see the real me, not just the guy in the fancy clothes. He turned to address the audience. This little girl has just given me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. She's shown me that my music, our music, can reach places I never imagined. Elvis knelt down to Sarah's level and spoke quietly, though the microphone still picked up his words. Sarah, I want to ask you something. Would you like to come visit me sometime? I'd love to show you my music room at home and maybe we could sing some more songs together. Sarah's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You really mean it? I never say anything I don't mean, sweetheart, Elvis replied. You've touched my heart tonight, and I don't think I'll ever be the same. He turned back to the audience. Folks, I've been performing for over 20 years, and I thought I knew what it meant to connect with people through music, but this little girl has just shown me that I've been learning that lesson all wrong. As Elvis prepared to help Sarah back to her parents, she did something that surprised everyone in the arena. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Elvis, she said, I wrote something for you. My daddy helped me put it in Braille, but maybe someone can read it to you later. Elvis took the paper with trembling hands, understanding Audio restoration. These recordings became some of the most treasured pieces in Elvis collectors' archives, not because of their technical quality but because they captured a moment of pure human connection that transcended the usual barriers between performer and audience. Sarah's influence on Elvis extended beyond just their personal relationship. Inspired by her story, Elvis began incorporating more charity work for disabled children into his touring schedule. He would often arrange for special seating sections for children with disabilities, and he made sure that his concerts were accessible to people who experience music differently than the typical audience member. In 1976, Elvis established the Sarah Thompson Foundation for Musical Accessibility. Though he kept his involvement largely anonymous during his lifetime, the foundation worked to ensure that concert venues and music programs were accessible to people with various disabilities. Sarah herself became involved with the foundation as she grew older, eventually serving on its board of directors. The foundation's work had a ripple effect throughout the entertainment industry. Other performers began to follow Elvis's example, making their concerts more inclusive and accessible. Venues started installing better hearing loop systems, tactile seating areas, and other accommodations that allowed everyone to experience live music fully. Sarah's own musical journey was profoundly shaped by her relationship with Elvis. She studied music therapy in college, focusing specifically on how music could be used to help children with disabilities. Her doctoral thesis, Seeing Through Sound: Music as a Bridge to Understanding, became required reading in music therapy programs across the country. In her professional work, Sarah often shared the story of her night with Elvis, but always with a specific purpose. She used it to illustrate how music could create understanding and empathy between people who might otherwise have no connection. Elvis didn't stop his concert for a blind girl. She would tell her students he stopped his concert for a human being who loved music. The blindness was just a detail. This perspective became central to Sarah's approach to music therapy. She taught her students to see past disabilities and focus on the person's relationship with music. Her methods were revolutionary for their time and became widely adopted in therapeutic settings around the world. The Mid-South Coliseum, where that magical night took place, was eventually demolished in 2006, but before it was torn down, the city of Memphis held a special ceremony to commemorate the venue's most memorable moments. Sarah, now in her 40s, was invited to perform one last time on the stage where she had sung with Elvis 32 years earlier. Standing at the same piano where she and Elvis had created their duet, Sarah sang Love Me Tender once more. This time she was accompanied by the Memphis Symphony Orchestra, and the performance was broadcast live on television. As she sang, many viewers reported that they could almost hear Elvis's voice joining hers, as if his spirit was still present in that sacred space. The performance raised over $1 million for the Sarah Thompson Foundation, ensuring that the work inspired by that November night in 1974 would continue for generations to come. After her performance, Sarah spoke to the audience about what that night had meant to her and to the world of accessible music. People often ask me what it was like to sing with Elvis, she said, but the truth is we're all singing with Elvis every time we use music to connect with another human being. Every time we see past someone's differences to find the song in their heart, we're continuing what started that night. Today, Sarah Thompson is recognized as one of the world's leading experts in music therapy and accessibility. She has written several books, including her memoir Singing in the Dark: A Life Shaped by Music and Love, which became a bestseller and was adapted into a major motion picture. But despite all her professional accomplishments, she says that nothing has ever matched the pure joy of that moment when she was 9 years old, sitting at a piano with Elvis Presley, creating something beautiful together. The story of Elvis and Sarah has been featured in documentaries, academic studies, and countless articles about the power of music to transcend barriers. It's taught in courses on disability studies, music therapy, and even business schools as an example of authentic human connection in an increasingly disconnected world. At Graceland, the room where Elvis and Sarah spent time together has been preserved exactly as it was during her visits. Tour guides tell visitors about the little girl who taught Elvis to see music with his heart instead of his eyes. A glass case displays the braille notes Sarah gave Elvis, along with his own handwritten response which he gave to her during one of her later visits. Elvis's note, written in his distinctive handwriting, read, "Dear Sarah, you have shown me that the most beautiful things in life can't be seen with our eyes but must be felt with our hearts. Thank you for teaching me how to truly see love. Always, Elvis." Below his signature, he had attempted to write her name in braille, a touching gesture that showed how deeply their friendship had affected him. The influence of that November night continues to ripple outward. Even today, music venues around the world have adopted Sarah's standards, a set of accessibility guidelines that ensure all audience members can fully experience live performances. Music therapy programs routinely reference the Elvis Sarah story as an example of music's power to create profound connections across any divide. Perhaps most importantly, the story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most transformative moments in our lives come not from grand gestures or elaborate plans but from simple acts of human kindness and connection. Elvis could have ignored the voice singing along from the audience that night, he could have continued with his planned set list and moved on to the next city. Instead, he chose to stop to listen and to connect with a child who saw him more clearly than anyone with perfect vision ever had in a world that often emphasizes differences and divisions. The story of Elvis and Sarah.